When this
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's me, Parth, and this is the iPod Nano, the 4th generation to be precise. So I've had it for the past 8 years, and even though I barely use it anymore, it remains to be one of the very few products that I've had such intense fascination for. Needless to say that this is old gold for me. So this iPod, this generation, brought back the taller structure that the first and the second generations came up with. I actually like the fatty iPod more, the third generation, but I guess that was just me. But because of that taller structure, the bottom part of the iPod was now cranked up with a 3.5mm headphone jack and a 30-pin dock connector, both of which are almost obsolete now in the company. But this also relocated the mute switch to the top, which actually looked much more minimal to me, even though it didn't really matter that much. But surprisingly, the taller dimension of the iPod didn't mean a bigger screen. So it had the same screen size of 2 inches, the same resolution of 320 by 240, and hence the same amount of pixels every single inch. The only difference between this and the one in the third generation was the fact that it had a taller aspect ratio, unlike the wide one that the fatty iPod had. But no matter what, the screen was spectacular for its time. It was extremely pixel dense 8 years ago and was also really bright. In fact, it still is one of the brightest displays around and has a cooler tone to it, which to be honest suits my taste. However, the taller form factor was actually meant for a better cover flow. So this had an accelerometer, so if you rotated the iPod, you could go directly into the cover flow and browse all of your albums from there. That was pretty sweet. And it also meant better gaming. Speaking of which, there were some spectacular games on the iPod like Klondike, Vortex and Maze, which actually took advantage of the gyroscope, and that sure was extremely high-end at least 8 years ago. The other advantage of the taller structure was that wheel, which was absolutely amazing because that bigger wheel actually gave much more room for your thumb to travel while you're scrolling on that pad. So it overall resulted in a much smoother experience, and that was amazing. But at the end of the day, no one really bought the iPod just to listen music on. Almost everyone got one for themselves because of 2 reasons, or actually 3. The hardware, the software, and the collaboration between the two. I personally think that both of these things, the hardware and the software, were way ahead of their time, and they still feel just as new as they were back then, which is kind of unique in its own way considering the fact that a lot of products get obsolete really quickly, and this is just as fresh. Like the hardware, I mean, you really can't deny from the fact that this is extremely beautiful. It's still thinner than the phone you're using right now, and it's probably thinner than the phone you'll be using next. Even the display has an above average amount of pixels every single inch, which is pretty good. And that wheel alone is enough to convince anyone to get an iPod for themselves. And so was the software. I mean, the ease of use with the animations all around and consistent frame rates and no hiccups or lags at all, and then those games, and all over this, the whole layout and the presentation of stuff on your screen was just mind-blowing for the time. But now it's no longer in production. It was discontinued quite a while ago. But the sad part is the iPod Nano, the one that sells right now, came out 5 years ago and is nowhere near as good as this was, both in terms of aesthetics and ergonomics. But it doesn't really matter because hardly anyone buys it or even uses it. In fact, the current iPod Nano, I'm pretty sure the last one, so it is not so far from being a part of the history. But this is actually pretty special. I'm pretty sure I'll never let go of this, even though I barely use it anymore. I'm just glad that I have it. As I said, old gold. But here's a fun fact. The first Apple product that I ever saw was actually the iPod. It was literally this black iPod Classic with 80 gigs of storage in it, and it not only introduced me to Apple as a company, but also developed an interest for technology in me. So if that moment wouldn't have happened, all of this, the channel, all these videos, you watching and listening to me wouldn't have been taking place. But that's pretty much it. That's my story and some info with the iPod. Hope you enjoyed watching and listening to this video. Feel free to share it around. Also, if you have certain memories or stories to share with certain tech products, feel free to catch up with me on Twitter. Should be fun. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in my next one. Take care.